There are nearly 2 billion Muslims on earth. From the outside, they seem identical. One God, one Quran, one prophet. But for 1,400 years, the Islamic world has been split into two distinct paths, Sunni and Shia. The Sunnis are the vast majority, about 90% of Muslims. They dominate countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and Indonesia. Their name comes from Sunnah, meaning they strictly follow the Prophet's tradition and the consensus of his companions. The Shias make up about 10%. They are the majority in Iran and Iraq. Their name means partisans of Ali. They believe the Prophet's family, specifically Ali, were the only divinely appointed leaders. So, beyond politics, how do they actually live differently? Let's break down the 5 major differences that separate them today. The first and most visible difference is how they pray. If you walk into a mosque, you can often tell who is who just by watching them stand. Hand position. When a Sunni stands for prayer, he typically folds his hands across his chest or navel, right hand over left. This is the standard posture in the majority of Sunni schools. A Shia, however, will typically stand with his arms resting straight down at his sides. They believe this was the original posture of the Prophet during the early years of Islam. Prostration. This is the most famous difference. When Sunnis bow down in prostration, they place their foreheads directly onto the prayer mat or carpet. Shias, however, prostrate on a piece of clay brought from the Holy Land of Karbala, combining prayers. Sunnis pray 5 distinct times a day: Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. They strictly perform each prayer in its specific time slot and only combine them in rare cases like travel or sickness. Shias also have 5 obligatory prayers, but they are permitted to combine them into 3 sessions on a daily basis. They often pray Dhuhr immediately followed by Asr and Maghrib immediately followed by Isha. The Adhan. Even the call to prayer has a unique signature. In the Shia Adhan, after the phrase Hayy al-Falah, they add a phrase that Sunnis do not say, Hayy ala khayr al-amal, which means come to the best of deeds. The second major difference is where they get their religious rules from. If a Muslim has a question about life, who do they ask? Sunnis rely on the Quran and the Sunnah, the Prophet's recorded sayings and actions. Over time, this evolved into 4 major schools of thought: madhabs, named after the scholars who founded them over 1,000 years ago; Hanafi, the oldest and most widely followed, common in Turkey, South Asia; Maliki, dominant in North and West Africa; Shafi'i, found in East Africa and Southeast Asia; Hanbali, predominant in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. Importantly, Sunnis consider all 4 schools to be correct and valid. A Sunni can follow any of them. They also believe that religious leadership is a matter of scholarship, not divine appointment. They respect the caliphs and companions, but they do not believe they were infallible. To Sunnis, only prophets are protected from error. Shias operate differently. They believe that the true interpretation of the Quran can only come through the 12 imams from the Prophet's family. They believe these imams were infallible, meaning divinely protected from sin and error, just like the Prophet. But since the 12th imam is currently believed to be hidden, Shias today follow a living scholar known as a reference. Every Shia must choose a high-ranking living scholar, like Ayatollah Sistani in Iraq or Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran, and strictly follow his rulings in a practice called imitation. Unlike Sunnis who follow schools from the past, Shias generally need the guidance of a living authority for modern issues. If you've made it this far, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. The third difference lies in the definition of marriage itself. While both groups view marriage as a sacred bond, they disagree fundamentally on one specific type of contract. In Sunni Islam, marriage is strictly a permanent contract. It is intended to last a lifetime until death or divorce separates the couple. For a Sunni marriage to be valid, it has strict requirements. There must be the consent of the bride's guardian, 2 male witnesses, and a public announcement. Sunnis strictly reject any form of temporary marriage. They consider it forbidden and view it as invalid, equating it to adultery. Shia Islam recognizes the standard permanent marriage just like Sunnis. However, they also permit a second type of marriage called temporary marriage. It is a contract between a man and a woman for a fixed period of time. This duration is agreed upon in advance. It could be as short. The couple agrees on a dowry and a time limit. Once the time runs out, the marriage ends automatically without the need for a divorce. Why the disagreement? Shias believe this practice was allowed during the time of the Prophet and is mentioned in the Quran, and that it was later banned by the second caliph, Umar, rather than by God or the Prophet. Therefore, they consider it still valid. Sunnis believe the Prophet himself banned this practice permanently before he died, making it forever prohibited. The fourth difference is emotional and historical, centered around one specific day in the Islamic calendar, the 10th of Muharram, known as Ashura. For Sunnis, Ashura is a day of respect and gratitude. They fast on this day because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam fasted on it. Historically, Sunnis view Ashura as the day God saved Moses and the children of Israel from the Pharaoh by parting the Red Sea. While Sunnis also mourn the tragedy of Hussein, the Prophet's grandson, that happened on this day, they do not have specific annual rituals of mourning. For them, it remains primarily a day of fasting. For Shias, Ashura is the most defining day of their religious identity. It is a day of intense grief, sorrow, and mourning. It marks the anniversary of the Battle of Karbala, where Imam Hussein and 72 of his family members and companions were surrounded and massacred by the army of the Umayyad Caliph, Yazid. For Shias, this wasn't just a battle, it was the ultimate sacrifice of the Prophet's bloodline to save the true Islam from corruption. On this day, Shias wear black and organize large processions. They listen to the heartbreaking story of the battle, weep, and often beat their chests as an expression of grief and solidarity with Hussein's suffering. They do not fast on this day, as it is considered a day of tragedy, not celebration. The final major difference relates directly to the fifth pillar of Islam. First, regarding the obligatory Hajj, both Sunnis and Shias are completely united. They both believe it is a mandatory duty, and every year they stand shoulder to shoulder in Mecca, circling the same Kaaba and praying to the same God. However, the difference arises with a second type of pilgrimage that Shias practice, known as visitation. Unlike Sunnis, Shias place immense spiritual value on visiting the shrines of the Imams, specifically the shrine of Hussein in Karbala and Ali in Najaf. For Shias, making this journey is considered a highly rewarding act of worship to seek intercession. The Sunni view Sunnis, particularly those following strict schools like the Hanbali tradition, strongly disagree with this practice. While they respect the Prophet's family, they believe that building grand shrines over graves and praying at them can lead to shirk, polytheism. They believe one should pray only to God directly without any intermediaries. Therefore, you will rarely see elaborate shrines in Sunni-dominated regions compared to the golden domes found in Shia cities. So, to summarize the 1,400-year split, politics. Sunnis believe in leadership by community consensus. Caliphate. Shias believe in leadership by divine appointment. Imamate, prayer. Sunnis fold their hands and pray on carpets. Shias keep arms at their sides and pray on clay tablets. Authority. Sunnis follow 4 ancient schools of law. Shias follow living scholars. Marjas. Marriage. Sunnis forbid temporary marriage. Shias allow it. Sunnis focus on the Prophet's companions. Shias focus on the Prophet's family and the tragedy of Karbala. Yet, despite these deep theological and historical differences, the similarities remain the foundation. They both testify that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. They both read the same Quran. They both fast the same Ramadan. And they both face the same direction in prayer. The Sunni-Shia divide is not about different religions, but rather 2 different interpretations of the same faith, one emphasizing the consensus of the community, and the other emphasizing the lineage of the Prophet. Assalamu alaikum.